Hi, this is Dave with Zippy Flies, and today I'm here at Clearwater Fly Shop, and we're going to tie the Floating Mandaclawrian Pass Crab. All right, this is one of the few patterns that we're actually not going to start with the hook in the vise, but rather we're going to start building the carapace for this crab. So the carapace in this case for the floating crab is going to be this 2mm foam in tan color. And then I'm going to utilize some crab cutters that significantly increase the speed at which to make these. If you're making one or two, you could simply make your own little pattern, trim them out by hand. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but these cutters do help a lot. These happen to be the size extra small and medium sizes. So just going to go ahead and simply stamp out one of each size per crab. These things make building these so much easier. It's almost cheating. Obviously you get consistency with each cut, but it's just so fast. It's super, super helpful. I mean, we're already all set with our shapes there. All right, so the very next thing that we're going to do is start coloring these. We're not going to completely do it, but we're going to get going, most of it. The color that I'm going to use Copic markers for all these colors. They are expensive, but they are worth it. If you want realism in these crabs or anything that you're doing, these work really well, mostly because they're alcohol based and you can blend them. I don't claim to be a big artist or anything, but through a lot of trial and error, I've come up with these colors that I'm using. This one happens to be pale olive. So I'm simply going to start with the larger piece, and the smaller one is going to be stacked on top of it. So through trial and error in the past, I figured out that for the weight of the hook, to get the crab floating on the surface, but not abnormally high on the water, these two sizes worked the best, in my opinion. You could certainly play around with what you think is better, but this worked well for me. So I just simply put some dots on here. It has a bit of a natural look. I leave this middle part open because I'm just going to be covering it with the top and with a smaller piece anyhow. And because I'm a little bit OCD, I like to go around and just touch the sides here. The fish will never see this, but you know, there's nothing wrong with trying to make your flies as pretty as you can. You know, if you're an avid fly tyer, you know, you probably pay attention to these little things that honestly probably just matter to us, but that's okay too. All right, so those are colored up, and the only thing I'm going to do next is just take a little bit of super glue, and I'm going to just glue the small one on top of the big one. Just make sure they're both oriented the same direction here. And the big trick here is just not to super glue my fingers together. We've all been there. So put a healthy dab on there. Get rid of that super glue. We're not going to use it for anything else. If you really want a really good bond, using something like an E6000 or a Zap goo product is great because it bonds real well, but it also has some flexibility within it. But these seem to be doing just fine. So that's pretty much built. The only other thing I'm going to do, once this glue is set up, some we'll come back to it just before we put it on, but is I'm going to use another cutter to just kind of give it a little more of a shape that mimics the pass crabs that we see all around here in Florida. All right, so we're done with the carapace for now. Our next step is we're going to get our Mandaclawrian size large crab parts from Flats Craft. We get these shipped up to us from Australia. They make a whole host of products. You've probably seen some of our videos already where we highlight some of them. These things are amazing, super tough, great, easy to tie in. They work real well, very durable. We love them a lot. So again, size large. This is the natural color. And what I'm going to do now is get set up to color these. We're going to use altogether 5 colors. So we already had that pale olive that you just saw. Another color that we're going to use is cotton pearl. So it's a fancy word for tan. I got violet, which is a less fancy word for violet. And then this other color is walnut, which is, again, fancy word for brown. And then there's one that's just clear. And I'm going to use this at the very end to just blend some colors. So, getting started. I actually want a little better background for y'all to see. This will work just fine. We're going to use the package here that came with Flats Craft. So I'm going to start with this purple. The pass crabs around here and all the pictures I've seen and when I have been around them, they have a purplish tinge to them, if you will. You know, if you're in another part of the country and you would rather them be like a blue crab, there's nothing stopping you from using a little bit of blue. And I just kind of go into these parts here, every spot where I want some purple to be. And I'm going to do it on both sides. And when you look at these Flats Craft products too, there is a side that has a lot of bumps and relief and the other side is flat. We're going to do this to both sides. So again, same area. And again, I'm just kind of mimicking where it was on the other side. And it's just the valleys of the peaks and valleys with where they're printed. Okay, so it looks, honestly, it looks a little bit terrible right now, but that's okay. We're going to get this moving along and start a little bit of blending. So the next part that we're going to do is just kind of blend the purple a little bit. And we're going to use this cotton pearl. And these markers do have like a chisel tip and a fine tip. I'm using just the fine tip the whole time here. And so now I'm just going to take this and make it a little less kind of sharp, if you will. You know, it's very sharpy looking at the moment. And now we're going to blend it some. So yeah, as I'm working these middle legs here, I'm knocking down all this bright purple and similar to the claws, taking that sharp, you know, contrast purple and just trying to make it look a little more natural. It fades some. And when my cotton pearl gets a little bit of the violet in there, I just touch it to the pad here and clean it up, almost like it's a brush. Again, I'm no artist. This is just Dave playing with the colors here on the fly tying bench. And you can see this is the side that has the little peaks and valleys that allow these claws to fold up in one direction. So, and then I'm just touching this bottom part. So we can really get a better sense of how this is all blended out. And the beauty of this, you know, this pattern is that it does lend itself to production tying. So if you want to make a half dozen of these or something, you just do them all in steps. And then, you know, color all your crabs, make all your carapaces, etc. So it really saves a lot of time. All right, now we're going back to our walnut, fancy word for brown. And I'm just going to put a line by the claws. And then I'm going to fill in these valleys. There's two. And then right up by the claw. Again, looks kind of terrible right now, but that's okay. Got a good valley right there. And then there's a couple small ones back by these flippers. Flip it over, mimic the other side. So pretty repetitive. And I'll just put a couple dots through there. Again, back to our pale olive that we used on the carapace earlier. Wrong side. Back to the fine point. And I'm just going to fill in some color in between all the brown. And we'll see that all this is going to get blended here in a moment with our clear marker. Again, pretty ugly, but there might be a quicker way, but this is just how I've done it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend these, and this will really give it some realism, this clear one. So yes, you're spending money to buy an expensive marker that has no color, but it's a pretty important tool. So here we'll be able to really see, I'm going to stay off of the pinkish purple area on the claw itself, and I'm just going to get into the brown and kind of pull those colors together. And down in that little valley there, I might try to get that a little bit, but it does highlight the shape of the claw a little bit. Your fingers will get dirty when you do these, by the way. It's just, accept that you're going to have to wash your hands when you're done, or just walk around with colors on your hand and look like a toddler or something, I don't know. And then again, I'm going to blend on the bottom Not super critical, you know, the top part of this crab, because it is a floating crab, but like we talked about, nothing wrong with making it look really nice. And I'm just going to clean up this clear marker so it'll be good to go for the next time. Good enough. All right, so a little tough to see with the Flats Craft packaging in the background, but now we'll be able to see. That's fairly realistic Florida pass crab. We could debate, you know, how much purple or pink should be there and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, if you don't like that color, make your own. There's nothing wrong with that. All right, so that is set, ready to be tied in. Before we move on, I'm going to come back to our carapace here. So our glue has set up some. I'm going to use that extra small cutter again. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut some little half moons in it. And you want to be careful you don't take too much out. And what I do is I use, get my bodkin here to point. This is the front of the crab here, but I'll use this little kind of notch, and that's what I'll use to shape it. So as you look down from on top here, I got to make sure I leave enough room for the hook where I'm going to attach it. This one's going to be pretty small back there by the hook. Took a little too much off that first part, but you can see we give it that teardrop shape. So again, little too much there, but we'll be okay. It'll still turn out just fine. And then because I use the cutter, I'm just going to touch around here real quick. And that is set. So we've kind of made our major components between the carapace and the claws. Get all this stuff out of my way. And now we can get on with our tying proper. The hook that we're going to use today is the Ahrex SA280 minnow hook. This is a size 1/0. Again, you could use other hooks, but for this recipe, this weight hook with this amount of flotation with these parts, we've achieved pretty darn nice results. So I encourage you to at least start there. If you got another hook that you prefer and favor, by all means use it. Just make sure that that you get the performance that you're looking for. All right, so we get our hook in the vise. Color of thread isn't super important. I'm using this, it's kind of just a tan color. Sometimes I use just white, and then I might use one of my markers to just kind of make it match a little. It's really not all that critical. But we're just going to lay down a thread base right there. The next thing that we're going to do is put some, lack of a better term, kind of some mouth parts. I would argue optional, but we're going to use some Magnum rabbit strip. This is an olive color, and you know, the idea is that this thing's floating. It's only going to have so much movement. So by adding some mouth parts, maybe there'll be just some natural movement of the rabbit. I like to just use these Magnum strips for two reasons. One, I already have them from tying tarpon flies. But what it does is I know that if I get about roughly 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch off of the hide, then I'm going to get consistency in my ties. So it helps me just easily measure it out. So if you had some rabbit fur that wasn't in a strip, you could certainly use it. But the idea, again, is just to get a little pinch like that. When I set it on, I look at the end of the rabbit fur and put it in line with the bend of the hook. It's not going to take a whole lot to secure it. And whatever you have for left over, I take it and get rid of it just so I don't have extra bulk in this fly. I'm going to pretty it up, mostly for the bottom, and advance my thread wraps just about to the hook point, or excuse me, the barb of the hook. And then we're ready to install our crab parts. And then again, you can probably just see there's one side that has all the little peaks and valleys. That's going to go down in this case. So I'm going to test fit it. I want to leave just a little bit of room back here so that I can, it's not much, just a whip finish when I'm done. And then I can also check up here in the front. I don't want to overlap too much onto my rabbit strip. So about there's good. And if you leave your thread hanging right around your hook point, you're usually good to be in this area here. I don't go real tight with this. In a weird way, if you pull real tight on these Flats Craft products, they almost flare like deer hair, like you're spinning deer hair or something. You know, not really, but they will have that that motion. So I like to put a couple loose wraps, totally not really required, but I also put some X wraps at the end. So if you look there at the front, you can just see that. And for me, I just like to secure them. I've done that to all my crab patterns utilizing these Mandaclawrians. Bunch of loose wraps on here. I'm going to do X wrap again. It's a little funky tying around the crab parts, but a little bit of practice, you very much so get used to it. And so, again, I mean, these are not on tight by any means, but I am going to get them down nice and level here. And we'll do a quick whip finish. And you'll see probably one of these flippers actually just moved up a little bit. That's very common. And we're literally done with the tie for this this pattern at this point. So from here on out, a little bit more of a kind of arts and crafts project, but you know, there are some tying principles in there. Not enough to learn every pattern in the world, obviously, but it'll get us going. So what I like to do is I'll very quickly take it out of the vise, push it down on something flat to make sure that everything is oriented perfectly. It was pretty solid. If this is the point at which if you were using like white thread, I'd probably grab my cotton pearl color and just give it a quick once over. That is the side of the crab that will be down towards the fish, so could make a difference. All right, so as we progress here, the items we're going to need as we move forward are some eyes. I like to use the large eyes from EP. It could be a different brand, but you want something that's got a little bit of size to it, because this is on a, you know, this is a large Mandaclawrian crab part, and it's going to make a, you know, roughly that quarter-sized carapace crab. So a little bit bigger eyes, and then also we're going to need some glue. We're going to use some E6000. It's flexible and it does a great job of holding the of sticking the crab together, but also flexing. Zap also makes one called Zap Goo. It's a very, very similar product. And then the lastly is just our the carapace. Something that you'll want to have that makes this significantly easier is at my local grocery store. I've got some of these like chip clip things that you get for so your you know, your Doritos don't get stale on you over time. I have about a dozen of these. So when I'm making a whole bunch of these, I literally would clamp these, set them to the side, and let them dry. So I'm going to just demonstrate that today. We're going to just continue with this single crab tie, but that is definitely very, very useful. So to get started, the first thing I did is take my EP eyes and I've trimmed them down about a ½ inch. I want them shortened up so they're not going to stick out the back of the crab. So next, I'm just going to take a little bit of my flexible glue, put it on the spine of the hook and a little bit out onto the claws here. So you can probably see that pretty well in the overhead shot, but you might also get a better look there. So that is set. And then I'm just going to lay these eyes in at a little bit of an angle. And it's kind of easier to push them to the rear, if you will, if I got to adjust them later. And now I'm going to take my carapace, and usually the rear of it I put right down by the hook eye down here, and you can see it's pretty skinny on this one because again I nipped a little too much. And then I'll adjust my eyes so that they're positioned where I want them. I don't like them sticking super far out, but I do want them to be a noticeable feature, and that's pretty solid right there. And so my step then would be to just put this on and then just set this to the side 10 minutes or something like that and let it set up. So really let that glue do its job. I'm going to skip that, so I guess I lose some credibility there, maybe a little bit with some of you, but just in the interest of showing the entire tie. So I'm going to put it back in here. And my point is UV resin, which we're going to use in the next step, some thick resin, will hold things together, but it's not really a bonding agent. It's more of a recovering or protecting things. So in the bottom here, we're gonna put a fair amount of it. And we will also use it to kind of shape our claws a little bit. It's not as critical of a pattern with the shaping of the claws as some of the other ones that we've done, because it's gonna stay on the surface, but I do like to make sure that it's set up how I want it. Okay, so now as we get ready to add our resin, I'm just gonna use my hand here to hold the foam piece since it's not completely secured at this time. So I'm gonna fill in right next to the hook and in between these crab parts, and then get narrower as I go to the rear of the crab. And then I like to just kind of push up, make sure everything is, final check it, that it's in position where I want it. A quick blast will hold it. I know when we tie a lot, you know, we can get in a hurry, but we really do need to give this a solid, honestly, 20 seconds or so, which is a lot of dead air. So I'm going to accelerate the timeline here just a little bit. But this should give you a little bit of an idea of how far out that resin is going. We're getting right out in here, down into the nooks and crannies. It's going to hold the eyes in place real well too. So that's very, very important. And again, our glue is just a little bit dry, wet as well. But that right there is the Floating Mandaclawrian Pass Crab. It sells very well in the shop, but it fishes really well too. I do make them in a extra large size as well. A lot of folks have been using them on redfish along with tarpon. So yeah, great little pattern. They're for sale here in the shop, but if you want to tie your own, I'm assuming you are wanting to tie your own because you just watched this whole video. Pay attention, down in our description, there'll be links to all these parts here in the shop. And probably the only thing that's not in there would be the markers, but I'm gonna see about getting those specific colors in the shop. So yeah, if you like this, please hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and check out our online shop, like I said, for completed flies and anything else you might need.